ASIC alleges greenwashing against a global giant. Get ready for higher bread and rice prices. And Virgin workers want to be gifted shares in any upcoming float. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It's Wednesday, the 26th of July, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, some interesting stories coming up today. You've also got a great interview coming up a little bit later with Terry Thomas, the CEO of Volpara Health Technologies.
Yes, she is a great enthusiast, Terry. It's all about technology around breast screening. That's what Volpara Health does. Really, really good technology. It's changing all the time. And we talk about how artificial intelligence can be used to, obviously help Volpara, but also health outcomes more generally. Fascinating little company. It's listed. It won the Microsoft Global Healthcare and Life Sciences Award recently. Just a great chat for anyone interested in that area. And certainly anyone interested in health.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well because Terry is so passionate about it. And it's just good to listen to someone who is so passionate about what they are doing. And when what they're doing is helping a lot of people, it's a really good listen.
Yeah, sure is, Michael.
Now, the main story this morning, Sean, the corporate watchdog has accused fund management giant Vanguard of misleading investors in its $1 billion plus ethical bond product about the sustainability of its assets.
It's the second major greenwashing case undertaken by the Australian Securities and Investments Commission this year, and alleges Vanguard did not screen out certain investments by the bond fund against ESG criteria as promised. Now, it's all about a fund called the Ethically Conscious Global Aggregate Bond Indexed Fund Hedged. That's quite the mouthful.
That is a cracker of a fund name, Sean. I mean, to be fair, you can imagine how hard it would be trying to name a fund now because there's so many. You've got to come up with something a little bit different.
I think the first two words in ethically conscious is the things that we've got to remember on this. So ASIC alleges that fund promised consumers that it wouldn't invest in bond issuers with significant businesses in a range of industries, including those involving fossil fuels. Actually, it invested in companies that had activities linked to oil and gas explorations. That's the allegation. Now, ASIC claims that Vanguard basically failed to do its due diligence to screen companies out and misled consumers in its product disclosure statements and even issued media releases about the fund's ESG credentials. In a statement, Vanguard said it had self-identified and self-reported one breach relating to disclosure weakness. That was back in 2021. ASIC then further investigated. Vanguard said it's now updated its disclosure documents for the fund and hired a head of ESG product, but certainly not a good look.
Sean, we've talked a lot about this and we're hearing plenty now about greenwashing. So basically investments that claim to be green but in reality aren't. I'm guessing that this allegation against one of the world's biggest funds will probably scare a few money managers around the place.
I'd imagine it will. Plenty of superannuation and managed funds rely on green screening to ensure investment portfolios are ethical. That's what Vanguard has done. In some areas, so we don't buy tobacco companies or we don't get involved in gaming companies, it's easier. In other areas, particularly in the bond market, it's quite difficult to sometimes find the underlying asset, particularly when a bunch of bonds have been grouped together. Both ASIC and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, they'll have pledged to crack down on greenwashing. In March, the corporate regulator launched action against retail super fund Mercer, so it's now taken on Mercer and Vanguard, two of the world's biggest funds. It's also warned that it is investigating several super funds. That could end up in court action. Now, ASIC Deputy Chair Sarah Court said that the tougher scrutiny was needed as investors increasingly seek out products that exclude certain industries on ethical grounds.
It's a big story.
Sure is. And it's one of those stories that will run and run and run for literally years, and it'll take a while for the fund managers to work out exactly how to operate in these the new rules set by ASIC and the ACCC. So, yeah, it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, sure is. All right. How did local markets perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 finished up 0.5% to 7,340 points. Now, the big miners did best. Now, the reason was Beijing yesterday signalled more help for commodities generally. It didn't actually unveil a major stimulus to help boost consumption, but the Communist Party Politburo focused yesterday on providing more support for the property sector and on reducing local government debt. Now, the property market accounts for around 40% of Chinese steel demand. Need iron ore to make steel. Also important for consumption of copper, aluminium and zinc. As a result, BHP, Fortescue Metal and Rio's share prices all jumped by around 3.5% to 4.5% yesterday. A really good day for those guys. Very tough day, though, for consumer discretionary stocks. That's all about fears of rising interest rates. Wesfarmers dropped, so too Domino's. That was worst on the market yesterday. The Star was down, JB Hi-Fi. So very broad-based across those consumer discretionary stocks. Banks were down also. Westpac led the way down. It was off 1%, while the energy companies, Woodside and Santos, they outperformed.
Okay. And what's happening in international markets?
Well, a couple of staple soft commodities, wheat and rice, are experiencing really big increases in prices. Wheat futures hit their highest level in 5 months yesterday after Russia attacked a port on the Danube River in Ukraine, destroying a grain hangar. Now, that, of course, escalates concerns about Ukrainian grain reaching world markets. And rice prices are set to surge after India, which is the largest exporter in the world, banned shipments of non-basmati white rice in an effort to keep prices lower domestically. Rice, of course, is vital to the diets of billions of people, particularly in Asia and Africa. So a lot going on there. Away from soft commodities, in fact, hard commodities too, cryptocurrency prices have come off a bit in recent sessions. Bitcoin is trading just above 29,000 US dollars a unit. And Michael, the Aussie dollar is up, trading just under 68 US cents.
I've been kind of sitting here tossing up whether to ask you this question, Sean, but I'm just going to do it, acknowledging that it might make me sound a little bit silly.
Or I won't know the answer.
No, that's also a possibility. We could both come out of this looking pretty bad here, Sean. Soft commodities and hard commodities.
Yeah.
How do they define? Where is this difference between them? Is it the one has to be kind of mined and extracted and the other one is something that is kind of
grown? Yeah, I always think, I don't know the official definition, but I think of it as food and non-food.
Ah, okay.
That's how I think of it. Now, there's probably a better, I might try and Google the definition as we're going on here, but that's how I always think of it.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. I was just trying to think of anything that could potentially cross over between the two. And I can't think of any rocks that are edible. I'm completely out of anything here, Sean.
Okay, I've got it here. Hard commodities include natural resources that must be mined.
Okay.
So you were right there, gold, rubber, oil. Mm-hmm. Whereas soft commodities are agricultural products. So I was right there. Corn, wheat, coffee, sugar, soybeans. There you go.
We both came out of that looking good.
We're looking good. I like it.
This is great. Let's come back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, opposition leader Peter Dutton is under fire after the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age reported that the Home Affairs Department handed a multi-million-dollar offshore detention contract to an Australian businessman just 1 month after federal police told the then Minister, Dutton, that the man was under investigation for bribery.
AFP's acting commissioner told Dutton in July 2018 that Sydney-based Mozammil Bahani was under investigation over suspected bribes to Nauruan politicians. The payments were made to secure preferential access to millions of dollars worth of phosphate for his company, Radiance International. A month later, in August 2018, the Department of Home Affairs entered into a fresh contract with Radiance to supply accommodation for refugees and asylum seekers. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Dutton needs to explain the serious allegations against him. We're going to hear plenty about this one.
We certainly will be. What else is going on in politics?
Foreign Minister Penny Wong yesterday said she hopes the annual AusMin meeting with her US counterparts to be held later this week will affirm the two countries' relationship in the region. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin will arrive in Brisbane on Friday. AUKUS, of course, will be on the agenda, probably top of the agenda, I'd imagine, but so too will be the two countries' relationship through the oceanic region. And also, Michael, Construction, Forestry, Maritime, Mining and Energy National Secretary Zack Smith was at the National Press Club yesterday. Very, very influential union, this one. He called on Labor to be bold and adopt the union's idea of a super profits tax to raise the billions needed to plug an estimated shortfall of 760,000 affordable and social homes. He said the reform is the only way for the government to maintain popular support for migration.
Sean, the Australian Electoral Commission says a record number of Australians are enrolled to vote ahead of the upcoming referendum on the Indigenous voice to Parliament.
Around 97.5% of eligible Australians are now enrolled to vote, with a sharp rise in the number of Indigenous Australians enrolled. Enrolments for Indigenous Australians and Northern Territorians are above 90% for the first time ever. There are 60,000 more Indigenous Australians enrolled than there were at the end of last year. It means the referendum will have the largest baseline for democratic participation ever. That's bigger than any federal election ever held previously. But I've got to say, the Australian Electoral Commissioner Tom Rogers did note yesterday that higher enrolment doesn't necessarily mean a higher turnout.
No. It's still good news though, isn't it?
It is. Everyone should be enrolled to vote, and we can only encourage people to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, borrowers in Sydney's southwestern suburbs and in Melbourne's northwest are more than twice as likely to be a month or more behind paying their home loans, according to ratings agency S&P.
And while the number of mortgages in arrears remains low across the country at about 1%, the new figures will push banks away from lending in particular areas. The Reserve Bank, which deliberates on interest rates next week, has previously warned that pressure on borrowers is unevenly spread. According to the Financial Review, the S&P Global Ratings figures show mortgages more than 30 days late are highest in Sydney's southwest, with some 2.5% behind, followed by Perth's northwest, Melbourne's northwest, and the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. That correlates to where properties have been more affordable, which in turn has attracted higher leveraged first-home buyers.
Sean, we mentioned this next one at the top of the show. Ahead of a float on the ASX, possibly later this year, workers at Virgin Australia have upped their campaign for better conditions, and they want to be allotted shares in any IPO.
So the Transport Workers Union submitted to Virgin's owners Bain Capital, Virgin Group and QIC, the fund manager, a list of 5 demands, including the award of $1,000 worth of stock to the company's 7,000 staff, so it's $1,000 worth of stock each to the company's 7,000 staff, as part of an employee share scheme. TWU National Secretary Michael Caine said workers deserve a slice of the business, given the private equity owners stood to gain hundreds of millions of dollars from any IPO. Virgin Australia pilots, cabin crew and ground workers are also calling for Bain to prioritise rewarding workers and addressing workplace issues that have caused stress, fatigue and high turnover. Interesting, again, to see where this one goes. It certainly won't be dismissed out of hand.
PwC Australia has banned its client-facing tax staff and partners from confidential working groups over tax policy under its new compliance rules.
The new rules were introduced after the firm was revealed to have misused government briefings to shape strategies for clients in its response to the Tax Practitioners Board's demand that the firm undertake a tax compliance program for its staff. PwC has revealed a bunch of warnings for staff and partners over confidentiality breaches. The Tax Practitioners Board also ordered PwC to prepare processes and training in November last year to basically look after the conflicts of interest or ensure that they're adequately managed. Up till the end of last month, 1,329 staff and partners at PwC had completed the training, about 89 still to go, mostly because they've been on holidays and things like that.
Okay, one more before we get to international news. Pilbara Minerals share price jumped 5% yesterday after announcing new June quarter production and sales records.
It wasn't all good news. The price of lithium spodumene concentrate, that's the stuff used in batteries and mobile phones and among other things, fell 33% in the quarter. Now, the miner also said it expects to settle on a new partner in downstream lithium processing within the next 5 months as it continues to boost production at its mine in Western Australia. Why I like this story. So Pilbara had predicted that prices would fall in the June quarter. The reason was that there's been a price war between sellers of internal combustion engine vehicles and electric vehicles in China. That's because new vehicle emission standards were due to come into effect in China on July 1. So in the months before that, there was really heavy discounting by petrol engine car makers, which of course reduced the demand for lithium. Just kind of interesting how a government decision a long way away can hit a local miner so hard.
Yeah, it is interesting. All right, international news time now, Sean. And Israel's parliament has voted through the first part of a controversial judicial overhaul pushed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's hardline government, triggering riots in many cities across the nation.
Yes, I'm not sure whether you've seen the footage, but there are big demonstrations going on in Israel at the moment. The fight over the judiciary has tipped Israel into its worst political crisis in years, according to the experts, igniting 29 straight weeks of protests. As thousands of protesters waved Israeli flags and blew horns outside Parliament, MPs voted 64-0 to back legislation to limit the power of Israel's top court, with the entire opposition boycotting the vote after a 30-hour debate. Opposition leaders said it was a bleak day for Israel's democracy. Now, the bill will prevent Israel's top court from using the standard of reasonableness to strike down government decisions. It's part of a broader effort to rein in the judiciary, which has been headed by Netanyahu's coalition with far-right and ultra-religious parties. Hopefully things will settle down there.
Sean, this last story is actually quite an interesting one. Joggers have snapped up the first batch of Yeezy shoes sold by Adidas since the end of its ill-fated partnership with Kanye West, cutting the risk that the group will have to take a big write-down on its remaining stock.
Yeah, so Adidas stopped selling Yeezy sneakers in October after ending its highly profitable agreement with fashion designer and rapper Kanye West, now known as Ye, after he made anti-Semitic remarks. In May, the company said it had decided to sell some of its outstanding Yeezy inventory because destroying it would force the company to write off about 500 million euros, according to the Financial Times. Adidas has said it will donate a significant portion of the proceeds to charities that combat racism and anti-Semitism. Demand at the first online sale of Yeezy shoes, which was spread over the end of May and the start of June, exceeded the most optimistic forecasts, and by June 2, which was towards the end of the sale, Adidas had received orders worth more than 508 million euros for 4 million pairs of trainers.
Wow, that is extraordinary.
Sure is.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. You're speaking today with Terry Thomas, CEO of Volpara Health.
Yes, all about how technology can improve health outcomes. Volpara is heavily focused on breast screening and breast cancer, and it's a great chat with Terry, a true enthusiast.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And I'll also put in today's show notes as well, Sean, a link to the new episode of How Do They Afford That?
What's it about, Michael?
Well, today, Sean, actually, is commercial property investing.
Right.
It's very much an introduction to commercial property investing. I know we've covered it a bit on Fear and Greed, but this is more of really an intro to it. Just how to think about it in terms of if you're looking at potentially considering it. I mean, it's me asking the question, so they're going to be fairly introductory because I'm learning as we go. But that is How Do They Afford That? You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, but I will make sure there is a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 26th of July, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and now X. Sean, did you see the change did happen and it's now all fully branded as X instead of Twitter?
Yeah. What about Threads? Are we on Threads too, aren't we?
Oh, we're on Threads as well. That's a very good point. I should mention that. There's not a huge amount on there yet from us, but we are there. We got on early and we reserved our name, and so you can follow us on there as well and just wait for that glorious moment when we finally break our Threads drought. It's coming soon. Anyway, I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.